Hi everyone, it's Megan and I'd like to welcome you all to this week's EOC and SOC Readiness series. We are going to have Luke at the helm and I'm going to let Luke go ahead and take it away from here.
Thanks, Megan. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. I will be joined today by my sidekick, Nico. He's about 6 weeks old. He is not great with the mute button, and he is still learning how to adequately navigate PowerPoint slides, but we're teaching him fast. So he'll be along for the ride with us today. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen. We're going to drive through a slide deck, but it's actually going to be a really interactive session today, I hope. We put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into trying to prepare this for you all. But what I first want to do is let me do a presentation check. Megan, am I coming across in full screen at this point?
Yep.
Okay, great. All right, so the talk for today is The Perfect Operation, which may sound kind of like a crazy title, but I think you'll start to see what we're getting at as we go through over the next hour together. My name is Luke Beckman.
Sorry, one quick thing. For some reason, your bottom bar just popped up on the screen.
Stand by.
It's gone. Good.
How's that? Better?
Perfect.
Perfect. So thanks, Megan, and jump in anytime something gets screwy over here. My name is Luke Beckman. I serve as the Division Disaster State Relations Director for California as part of the Pacific Division team. I've been doing partner collaboration, government work locally, at the state level, nationally and internationally for the last 15 years. But more importantly, we have a great team of people here who have helped put this together and who have helped kind of shape a narrative for us. And so today we're going to look at what does the perfect operation look like? And can we help create that as part of external relations? So the first thing I want to share with you is that disasters aren't hard. And that's going to be an interesting how would I put it? An interesting thesis that we're going to explore today. But I'm going to argue that disasters aren't hard. They're complex, but they don't have to be hard. And there's a lot that we can do in external relations that is going to reduce that complexity so that disasters become kind of smooth and as well as possible, well-oiled operations for us. So let's look at what happens in a disaster. First, people are impacted by a hazard. There's plenty of hazards that happen, wildfire in the middle of the forest, an earthquake that happens in the middle of the ocean that doesn't generate a tsunami, typhoon that just circles around in the ocean. Plenty of hazards that don't impact humans. And we kind of, from the Red Cross perspective, we kind of don't care about those so much. We're looking at the things that impact people because we do mass care. So those people who are impacted, they shelter in place or they evacuate. Those are the two things they do. And those people, if they evacuate or if they shelter in place, require shelter, food, and comfort. That's our mission. But what makes it complicated? It's the inability to share or receive information effectively. It's also the shortage of resources. That's what really makes it a disaster. But if we boil it down to those two things, we can start to see that, that there's a lot that's manageable for us for today. I always say in a presentation format, first, you tell them what you're going to talk about, then you tell them, and then you tell them what you told them. So today, we're going to introduce you to some tools that will help save you time and make your job easier so that you can lean forward and focus on three key things: listen, think, and communicate. That's the pyramid, the triangle, the trifecta, whatever you want to call it, of what we do in external relations. We need to be listeners, we need to be thinkers, and last, communicators. The lean forward piece is also critical. And if I could also ask for those, I know we've got a lot dialed in, please check your mute buttons. I know Megan and Sherry will be going in and please just cover the audio, but please on your own end, make sure you're muted. The leaning forward piece is really important for us. There's kind of two postures you can have. You can kind of sit back and let things happen, or you can lean forward and try and affect positive change in a crisis. So let's look at an example. Let's break it down looking at a wildfire. So in a wildfire, people are going to evacuate or shelter in place. Many are going to evacuate as the fire encroaches on them. Our mission is mass care. We don't fight the fire. We don't evacuate the people. We catch the people. And in most cases, we aren't solely making mass care decisions on our own. We're not doing that unilaterally. We're working with government to figure out where to shelter and how many to shelter. And in many cases, the government actually makes those decisions, and then we are just the executive agent. We execute that on behalf of the government. But we then communicate our actions, our shortfalls, and our necessary changes. So this is a big key concept for us in external relations, especially when we look at emergency operations centers. We need to think about these two circles, and this kind of drives my whole life. What can we control and what can we influence? So when you think about a problem, right, put up your control and your influence target and think, can I control it? Yes or no? If you can control it, game on, let's make it happen. If you can't control it, then ask yourself the question, can we influence it? Right? So can we make a nudge? Can we lobby somebody? Can we make a pitch? Can we advocate? That's influence. And if we can't control it, and if we can't influence it, then that kind of begs the answer to the equation, maybe we don't touch it, right? There's a lot of things we try to put our hands in a pot on that we can't control and we can't influence. So as you think about what we talk about today, I want you to constantly be thinking, is this something I can control or is this something that I can influence? So I've got a picture here of some fighter pilots, and there's an adage in aviation. I come from a family of pilots. My brother's flying over the skies somewhere in California today. And with pilots, when you have a crisis, even when you don't, there's three things that pilots think about. First is aviate, second is navigate, and the third, kind of like us, is communicate. So no matter what's going on, the first thing you've got to do is fly the aircraft. The second thing you've got to do is figure out, where do I need to put the aircraft? Am I going somewhere? Am I taking it down? And then the third thing is, if you're able to fly, if you're able to steer, then and only then do you actually begin to communicate. Because if you start communicating first, what you actually start to see in a lot of after action reports and crash transcripts and all those different things, what happens is the pilots forget to fly the plane. And you get a lot of people get so focused on this little nitty gritty detail that they forget that they're losing altitude. Now, how do we take something like that when you think about split-second decisions, life and death, that comes with flying an aircraft? There's a lot that we can learn and bring into our work in external relations, especially as we look at working in emergency operations centers and as we look at collaborating with partners across the full spectrum. So you see here, two words changing for us: listen, think, and then communicate. Oftentimes, we kind of get ourselves into hot water. And this is where we talk about disasters aren't hard, but they're complex. Because of the complexity, what we do is we start talking and we talk about the complexity. But what we forget to do is listen to the one person in the room who is sharing this huge nugget of information. And once you listen, what that does is it's active listening. It's not passive listening. I'm not just sitting there taking notes and sitting back in my chair. You can see even for this presentation, I'm leaning forward. So you can listen actively. You can be an engaged listener. But if you're truly open to listening, that allows you the time and the space to think, right, to process. Once I've listened, once I've processed, now it comes time to communicate. I might need to talk back or respond to the speaker. I might need to compose an email. I might need to host a conference call. I might need to convene partners. But then and only then should I be communicating. So this is something, I'm not kidding. This is something I carry around on a little 3x5. I wrote on the back of my business cards one day. I carry it in my wallet because it's something, even in a crisis, that I need to remind myself of. And if you find yourself talking too frequently, or if all you do is, if you're thinking and your mind is spinning and wandering off, you're not paying attention to that meeting or that briefing, or you're not listening, you're not paying attention to that partner who is sharing some really critical information with us. So I talked about the fact that we're going to use some tools in external relations that are going to help us reduce that complexity and that difficulty of a disaster. There are three tools we're going to briefly glance over today. I'm going to introduce you to them. You may be very familiar with these. You may use something like this already in your region or your chapter or on operations. One thing we're going to do over the next couple months in this series, we're going to actually introduce some standardization to these tools across the Pacific Division. We're going to start to create an expectation, and we're going to backfill that with the training and the support network and the real-time lessons learned. And, hey, how did it go? What was your experience on this operation? And so these are standard operating procedure for us in the Pacific Division. So whether you're coming into an operation or somebody's coming in to support you, you know that these are going to be in use and that we can really rely on them. So these three tools, the daily activities log, the mission tracker, and the external relations checklist are going to kind of be our bread and butter. There may be some others, but these are the three we want to introduce you to today. So we've got a screenshot here. This is actually from Kentucky. My volunteer partner, who you all know, Sherry Lewis, shared this with me. This is one they used just the other week. A daily activities log is something often you may have seen it as a shared Word document. It might have been a piece of paper that sits on the mass care desk, but it's really a way to continuously capture what's going on so that when you have a change of shift, when there's a new team member who comes in, when the team grows, we need to brief a new boss or a new teammate. This allows for really quick shared situational awareness. And you see here, you've got operational actions, issues, statuses, resolutions. Then you've got some action needed and pending items. So you can see what is it that we really need to keep doing or keep focusing on. Then we have something called the mission tracker. This is something that pretty shortly in the next couple months, we're actually going to have. This has been used on a number of Pacific Division operations, but not across the board consistently. But this is one thing where we're actually going to see a mission tracker deployed within Microsoft Teams on each of our relief operations. And the idea here is that when a partner comes to us and says, hey, Red Cross, can you do X? Or hey, Red Cross, we need this to happen. Or we hear a partner talking about, man, there's this huge unmet need in this county or in this neighborhood. The mission tracker is the place for that. And so we've got about 15 fields in the mission tracker. This is a snapshot of just a couple. But the idea is we need to know who owns this in the Red Cross. What's the status? What's the title of or the description of the mission so that we can quickly reference it? Every mission will get a unique mission number. So that you can say, hey, guys, let's check out mission 422. Everybody puts eyes on mission 422, and we all know we have a common language, right? We're not talking in codes or acronyms. Everybody can just search 422. There it is. You can see the mission. We know when it needs to start, by when it needs to be accomplished. We know which agency is requesting the mission, and we can see the actions that have been taken by the Red Cross. One of the things that we see over and over again, and the piece that kind of makes disasters hard, is we miss things. That's not just the Red Cross, it can kind of be any agency. But something is missed, or there's an expectation that's set, and we talk about overpromise and underdeliver, or underpromise and overdeliver. We always want to be the underpromise and overdeliver, but often on disasters we may overpromise. Oh yeah, of course we can bring all those bulk items, those distribution emergency supplies to these 5,000 households, and we only hit 1,000. We have overpromised and underdelivered. The mission tracker really helps us understand what the size, scale, scope, complexity of those asks are. They help us triage and they help us follow through. So the third one, and this is one we're really going to dig into today, is the external relations checklist. And this is the fun part, the field operating guide. This is something where we're actually going to work over the next couple months to turn this into something that you can print out. Maybe we print it for you. I don't know yet, but something that you can actually have in your hands, physically in your back pocket when you're out in the field, because God knows things get lost in email, you can't find the file, your laptop dies, you don't have internet. We want this to be something that you can have on your person, carrying around, you can share with partners, you can all take a look at it. And what we're going to do is this is essentially going to be the remainder of our session today, is we are going to, as a team, we're going to talk about and brainstorm on what makes a perfect response. And it's going to take your input, and over time, over the next couple months, we're going to take all of your input, all of us on the call here today, and we're going to build this checklist and this field operating guide together. So it's going to be a product created by all of us, for all of us. Now, I talked about posture, right? I can do this presentation and we can talk and I can lean back or I can lean in. And the thing is, when it comes to posture and attitude, this makes all the difference in an emergency operations center. This oftentimes is the difference between a successful collaboration or response and recovery or an unsuccessful one. And so over the next couple months, with the tools, the tricks, the tips, the education, the training, the trust building that we're going to be working on, I hope you walk away with the fact that If you're deploying in external relations, your posture needs to be one of leaning in. It needs to be engaged. If you're going to deploy as a liaison and take notes and just kind of wait for things to happen, that's not what we need given the increasing complexity of our responses, the growing number of our partners, the faster the responses are. Mass care is a really tricky beast. And so our posture and our attitude make all the difference. So here's a comic. I'm not going to read it, but I'll give you a couple seconds to take a look at it. All right, we don't need any moseying. We want to be engaged. We want to be leaning forward on things. So we talked about listening, thinking, and communicating. When you're deployed or supporting an emergency operations center, working with government partners, working with community partnerships, I like things in 3. I can remember it that way. And I tried to think, I talked with a bunch of our state operations center cadre team members and tried to come up with what are sort of the big 3 words that we know that we need to listen, think, and communicate. But what are the 3 things that kind of, as we engage with others, what are the things that really make someone successful? And the words that came up over and over again, the first was trust. The second was having a repeatable or predictable structure, right? Something that doesn't change, that we can rely on all the time. And trust is something, there's a formula for it. In a perfect world, we're building trust over decades, years, months, weeks, days, not just doing it right in the minute. But there's a lot you can do in real time to build trust with other people, right? You communicate back to them, you close the loop, you buy people lunch and coffee, right? You start to build relationships. So there's actually things you can do to build trust very quickly. Structure should be set. That's repeatable, that's predictable. But the thing that's going to set you out, that's going to make you stand out, help you lean in the most, and make you really successful and grow in this role is feel. This is when we talk about, what's your gut feeling or your gut reaction or your gut sense, or what do you think? When somebody asks you, what do you think? It's all about our feel. And some of the ways that you can develop feel more quickly, right? We know that it takes time in the saddle. It's never going to replace, nothing can replace that, that time, right? That experience. But there's a lot we can do to help you understand when something's right or when something's a little bit off. And our checklist is actually going to help us with that a lot. So how can we go about imagining what a perfect response looks like? Well, hopefully this is going to be a worthwhile endeavor. Now, all my comics, Calvin and Hobbes is my favorite. I've read every single one. I have all the books. So take a look at this one. So hopefully this is not going to be a dumb assignment. We will not need a time machine for this exercise. We will live in the present and we will take ourselves into the future and we will have fun. So when we think about that perfect response, let's look at what stays the same and then what's different from disaster to disaster. Because I would argue that disasters aren't all that different. So what stays the same? Well, people evacuate in many cases. They're going to need shelter. They're going to need food. And in the recovery process, right, they'll need to rebuild. They'll need to come back to their community. All those things are essentially the same. You might build with different materials. Maybe you've got different dietary needs. Some people have different requirements in a shelter, but all that is doctrine, standard operating procedure, right? There are formulas that help us calculate what those requirements are. So let's look at what's different. The thing that actually makes disasters complex. It's the size and location of the need. But in a lot of ways, we talk that's numbers. We have some formulas and tools that help us with that. But there's the culture of an area. There's the power structure in an area. There are the local politics of an area. So don't tell all of our operations and planning and logistics friends this, but when you look at what's different, what really makes a disaster complex, aside from a shortage of resources, the differences all fall in external relations. That is the complexity. And so we need to be ready to adapt and adjust to that. So here's the exercise. We have about 40 minutes and we are going to go through this together as a team. What we're going to do is we're going to look at readiness. I'm not calling it preparedness intentionally. because I want to distinguish readiness and preparedness. Readiness are all the things that we're doing in blue sky, which might include preparedness actions or training people about different things. Response is from the minute something goes boom to until we kind of decide that recovery is happening. Now we know that we should be recovering right away, but recovery in this case of there's a federal declaration, people are looking at rebuilding, debris removal, there are some standard tasks, long-term recovery working groups that happen in recovery. So we're going to think about, as we come up with some ideas together as a group here, and I'm going to ask Megan and Sherry to help me out as we do this. We're going to look at it from the community partnerships and the government operations perspectives. Okay, now you might be somebody in public affairs or fundraising, and if you've got ideas for that, I want you to throw them in, but we're going to focus on community partnerships and government operations. You might be a elected official liaison, you might be a regional executive, you might be a disaster program manager. That is your role. Your function is either dealing with people in the community or dealing with government actors. So that's why I want to focus on community partnerships and government operations. Plus, those are our positions on the regional steady state table of organization. So we actually have this built into our structure. Now, what is it that we're going to do? So, okay, Luke, you talked about readiness, response, recovery. I got it. I'm board. You talked about community partnerships and government operations. Check, check. What we are going to do is we are going to come up with things for our perfect response for our external relations checklist. Okay. Now, a lot of times we say, well, I need to collaborate with people. Well, that's great, but I can't do a lot with that. What does collaboration actually mean? Does it mean that we go to a baseball game together? Does it mean that we have a conference call? Does it mean I send emails? Does it mean we sit and have a beer, in the evening? I don't know what that means. So we're actually going to try, and I want you to think as we go through this, about creating SMART checklist objectives. We're going to try this out. And so we write SMART objectives all the time in our incident action plans, IAPs. We're going to do the same thing for external relations today. So specific, measurable, accurate, relevant, and timely. Now, I don't feel like you have to get these perfect. We're going to work these over the next couple months. But everything you write down today, we're going to capture that, and we're going to sort of put that into our external relations brain. And your ideas today are going to end up in our checklist that we are all going to use and hold ourselves accountable to on a relief operation in the Pacific Division. So we want to start with an action verb. We want to start with something that kind of sparks the mind, right? That gets me oriented on where we need to go. Then I want to know clearly what needs to happen. What is it we're trying to do? Okay, if we're gonna coordinate or convene or write or send or staff, what is it we're actually doing? Then, if possible, by when might it need to be accomplished? So you might say, initiate a conference call with county stakeholders. That's great. Are we successful in external relations on a DR if we initiate that conference call on day 7? Probably not. What makes a little more sense? Is it 24 hours, 12 hours, 48 hours? Think about that a little bit from your experience. And this should be understandable to somebody who's not in external relations. Right, we've got to keep it simple. So again, we're going to go back to our readiness, response, and recovery. And what I'm going to do is we're first going to start in readiness and go community partnerships and GovOps. And here's how we're going to do this. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second so we can get the wonderful faces on the screen. We've got Sherry, we've got Megan. So we're going to have a dialogue. And what I'd like to do is I'm going to do sort of a call and response with Sherry and Megan. I'm going to put them on the spot a little bit. We're going to first start in readiness, and you'll see how we go. And what I want you to do is, because we have 120 people in this call today, I can't call on everybody. I can't have video on for everybody. That's going to crash all our computers, and we can't all come off mute. We're going to talk over each other. So what I'd like you to do is when we get to a point, for example, readiness, community partnerships, if you've got something that you would like to see in the checklist or that's a success thing for you, I'd like you to type it into the chat. And as we go through, I'm going to be looking through the chat, and I'll pick out some, as fast as I can, I'll pick out different ones. But I want you to know, rest assured, we're going to take everything and we're going to use that to build the foundation of our checklist. So what I'd like to do is let's start with readiness. So Sherry and Megan, if we think about what are some elements of community partnerships within readiness that help us dictate the perfect response, right? What are some perfect response kind of elements in community partnerships for readiness? What do you think?
So I'll start. A couple months ago, I was participating in a Cal OES Southern California preparedness meeting. Team Rubicon, several other partners were participating, and they approached me afterwards to ask about some instruction opportunities where we could educate them in mass care and what Red Cross does. And specifically for them, they were looking at how could they help in a catastrophic event when we're really low on labor and how that might look. And we've been having regular meetings. Today was our final meeting to set the schedule and what the topics that we're actually going to cover at that training are going to be. And just super exciting to move forward and educating them in the whole process. Primarily that regardless if a disaster is catastrophic or a house fire, the needs are the same. We identify what unmet needs our clients have and how we can facilitate those needs. And it's an exciting opportunity in the readiness phase to work with our partners, build those relationships, understand and practice working together.
Great, thanks, Sherry. Megan, what about you? If we think about community partnerships pieces in the readiness world.
I'm going to echo a lot of what Sherry said in a more general sense. So the readiness or preparedness phase is the time to be reaching out to your various existing and potential new community partners. There are new partner organizations springing up all the time. So not just having a static list of the standard ones you have, but being open to new organizations coming onto the scene. Lean forward and arrange and hold meetings and exercises addressing various natural and human caused hazards during blue skies to maximize your readiness for when an incident does occur. And then making sure that all partners have each other's contact information, because it all goes back to communication. If you can't get a hold of your partners when we have an incident, you're going to have a problem right off the bat.
Yeah, that's for
sure. You have those communication lines already functional and up to date. As people come in and out of organizations, sometimes those contact lists you think you had aren't going to be the same. They're not the same individuals, or maybe not even the same organizations. So ensuring that those contact lists are up to date so that when something does happen, you can hit the ground running.
Yeah, I love if I try to pull some threads from each of you. So Sherry, I like the fact that you pulled out a specific partner. That's something, whether it's Team Rubicon or World Central Kitchen, Salvation Army, Southern Baptist, Suchi, those could be lines in our checklist of have you called them to see how they're doing, or have you talked and shared a plan, right? So specific lines there. Megan, I like the fact you had lean in, you had check or update, right? Contact list. That's a really specific task that we can measure. Have we done it? Have we not done it? Right? So that I know when I come into a region to support, when we have something going on, we can see, oh, region hasn't done that, or the chapter hasn't been able to, or they did it as recently as blank. So I think I can trust a lot of those contacts, right? Or I know that it's been done, but has anybody shared it with me? Right? So now I know, even before I get there, I can say, can you please share this with me? Or I'm looking for it. And maybe we can have a specific place where that lives, right? And thank you for people who are already putting stuff in the chat. So we're on readiness and we're on community partnerships. What are some things that you'd love to see as line items in our external relations checklist? Let me take a look and see a couple of the ones that we've got here. Tom, amen on that one, right? That list of those community partners and that contact info. That should be something that's an expectation. And I think Sherry's actually got in the next week or 2 or 3, she's got something up her sleeve. We're actually going to take a look at that. So Tom, you're reading her mind. Let's see, and we've got Marion. I like that about, let's see, door open later in the day. Clients leave and return, gave shelter to people who thought. Yeah, so you've got a lot of flow, and so as we think about the relationships that we can establish ahead of time on sheltering, when we think about a lot of times we sort of leave the shelter relationships, right? Those are partner agreements with operations, with the sheltering teams. But who's that going to blow back? The external relations are the ones who are dealing with the partner who's given us the shelter. And so if we can figure out a line item there on our checklist to touch that, that's huge. Trina, let's see what we have here. Group of citizens that commonly show up. So one of the things that we could have is we could have, are there community organizations or Facebook pages or Yahoo groups or WhatsApp things that exist in the community, next door neighborhoods that we can already be tapped into, right? So one thing is, ensure that we're a member of this and once a month share a Red Cross fun fact or share some preparedness information, right? That gets us embedded into those communities. All things that we can do in a measurable, timely way. Norma, including cell numbers. Amen. How many times we send emails and nobody ever hears back, right? And then we assume that, well, somebody says, well, are you coordinating with them? And you say, yeah, I coordinated. I sent them 3 emails. Well, did you ever hear back? Did you ever talk to them? I'm sorry, you're not coordinating. You're shooting information past them, and you're one of 5,000 emails. This is so great. So we've got Gordon on ready rating, Red Cross ready, hands only CPR, right? That can be a checklist item for us. Ensure that we have shared that information with a partner. Specific dietary needs, right? It's sort of our feeding list. So we know that feeding is working on feeding partner lists and things like that. Do we have that in external relations? We need to. We better need to, right? Because we need to know when somebody says all of a sudden we have 50 clients who are this ethnicity, this culture, this dietary need, this religion, whatever it is. We need to ensure that we've got something up our sleeve and that feeding's not thinking about that from scratch. Because what feedings do is they're trying to put the 95% of meals on the table. They're not trying to worry about that 5% of the off piece. That's going to fall on us. So keep those coming. Keep these coming. So let's go, Megan and Sherry. Let's shift our conversation from the community partnerships piece in readiness to the government operations one. Megan, why don't we start with you on the government operations piece? What are some things we can do, checklistify, if you will, that we can do for government operations?
I'm going to focus mostly on local, county, and tribal partners, and I believe that Sherry's going to tackle state and federal. So what I would do is work on building up and solidifying relationships and setting expectations with our local, county, and tribal partners, so that when an incident occurs, everybody is familiar with how the other agencies and organizations operate, what they can and can't do, what they can and can't provide during a response. Mm-hmm. And then again, going back to communication, always keep those lines of communication open and actively participate in planning and exercises with our governmental partners. They're continually going on. So making sure you're part of those county calls, those local calls, and take an active role in that readiness and preparedness.
Yeah, I love that, Megan. When we think about it's that leaning in, and I'm seeing 3 or 4 messages here in the chat about that lean in. But think about what are the things we can do on a recurring basis with our government partners to make them feel engaged. And what if we had a 1-pager that we as the Red Cross could share with community partners and government partners that kind of says, like insider baseball, guys, this is what we do and this is what we don't do, right? What if we were sharing something with people that said, hey, remember that time you wanted to give us 60 truckloads of used clothes and we said no, and then it was this whole thing, and then there was this news article and everybody hated us? What if we proactively sent something about like an unsolicited donations policy out to all of our partners so that they're sending that out to all their constituents? I love that. Sherry, let me flip over to you.
So at the state level, regularly, one of the partners that I meet with, usually on a weekly basis, is California Department of Social Services. They co-lead the Mass Care and Sheltering Task Force with us at the State Operations Center during multiple disasters when it's activated for the state of California. So staying in touch with them weekly, understanding any of their leadership changes so that when disaster strikes, we immediately know who our go-to partners are, how they're going to staff the State Operations Center, what the expectations of each of the agencies are that immediately report and respond, and how the other agencies on the task force kind of cover for those until all of the agencies are present. And again, how we can communicate with our operational areas who are being impacted directly by the disaster. So that weekly touch point gives us an opportunity to cover any questions, not cover up, sorry, that was a misspeak, cover any questions anyone might have about Red Cross operational changes. And with COVID-19, there have been constant changes to our operational procedures, especially in regards to how we shelter, how we mass care out in the field. So having that familiarity, they know they can text me at any moment, especially if something's happening at the state. We have great rapport and we can get started immediately without that break-in period of who are you and what is your role? We already know. We're ready to get cracking. So yeah, I think that's the most vital.
You know what's happening. Yeah, I love that. And I'm seeing here from Eric, right? We're looking at, I see list here. Mary, we're talking about feeding vendors. I know that's sort of on the community partners side, so I'm catching up. Copy of statement of impartiality. Norma, that's huge, right? How many times has that bitten us in the butt when people just are like, yeah, you have to do this, right? No, we don't. And we've got Excel spreadsheet on different things, contact lists, right? These are really specific things that we can put out there. Daily meetings, right, for check-ins, right, or stand up. Every time there's think about when does response start? That's when the bad thing happens. But let's say we've got red flag conditions, right, or there's a typhoon or hurricane heading towards X or Y island, right? That we're in that readiness moving into response phase, and that could initiate where we've got, sort of the 120-hour hurricane timeline, and we've got 72-hour timelines and all these things. But think about what in government operations we can be doing when we know that there's a hazard coming. That might be the time to pull out the checklist and run through these 10 things, because people may not pay attention, on a random Tuesday in January where nothing's going on. But you better believe when they know a threat's coming, they're paying attention, right? And that's a time for a quick refresher there. So please keep these ideas coming. So keep some ideas. Let's get some more ideas for government operations on the readiness phase. What are some things we can do with our government partners? Let me scroll through and get a few more here. Norma, I love the hosting town halls with government partners to update on major updates. Right, that just keeps a touch point alive. I mean, you never know where those conversations are going to go, but you always learn something, no question about it. And I love the piece on just understanding their procedures and permissions, right? So Ann got really tactical there, which I love, is looking at an EOC so that when you show up or when somebody who's here to help you, because what do they always want? They want the person they know. They want the face that they've seen before. But we got to let them know in the Red Cross, that's not how it works. Not always. Actually, nowadays, more than ever, probably not the most common thing, right? You're going to get a lot of different people, potentially, especially if there's a big disaster. And the last thing you want is that Red Crosser who's locked out, standing in the parking lot, looking at their phone, trying to find somebody who's going to let them in, right? Especially with COVID too, and all the, whether it's the vaccination things, the negative tests, you got to do the thing over here. So there's a lot there, and that's a great call. Aaron, I love your piece on the sound the alarm events. Right? We don't just have to talk the sound the alarm piece with community partners. That can help us with government get feet in the doors. Think hands-only CPR. We think about blood drives, right? On the government operations side, that can be a thing to just, the more that they see Red Crossers, the more that they realize that, wow, wait, you guys are like 95, 96, 97% volunteer? I didn't know that. I thought you were all paid staff. I hear that all the time, right? Because our volunteers are that awesome. And they're like, can we hire you? Right? You see, any good Red Crosser has probably been trying to get hired somewhere, right? People are always trying to poach us. Sue, I love the piece on participating in drills with government partners. That's a big way to lean in. Even if there's an exercise happening and nobody wrote in a mass care component, oh, you better believe there's a mass care component. Let's find one. Let's create it, right? So that could be something there, is look at your exercises and create a mass care inject. So it gives us a reason to have a seat at the table. Michael, I love that on the county fire chiefs monthly, right? That could be a line item on our task list, right? Participate in the monthly luncheon, whatever it is. So let's go into response. So Sherry, I'll start with you. Let's think about, and everybody, let's pivot our heads over to community partnerships. What are things that we would want on our checklist for community partnerships in response? So Sherry, you're on the spot.
again, I typically report from the State Emergency Operations Center or the State Operations Center in California. And it's vital right off the bat to connect with our national and state partners like the Salvation Army, World Central Kitchen, who are supporting our feeding efforts. Tzu Chi is another national partner that responds differently depending on what the disaster is and what region they're covering. But often they have financial support that they offer. So critical to connect with them as soon as possible and see what their capacity is for this particular disaster and what we can start facilitating with them. Unsolicited donations, we know that they are a monster and huge work. So how quickly can we activate the Seventh-day Adventists to support the unsolicited donation management, which they have great expertise and skill in? So those are, I think, right off the bat, the three things I want to start tackling quickly, because I know they're some of our biggest challenges in mass care when you're looking at it from a state perspective.
Yeah, as you were talking, Jody came in, and Jody, I love this one, is, you know, making sure that partners understand they may be working with people who they haven't worked with in the past. That can be a specific task that we complete in a response, which is something as simple as an email reminder or a text like, hey guys, I know you're used to seeing my face, but you're going to see some other people rotate through and you need to trust them because I trust them. That right there goes a long way, right? You've opened the door to new Red Crossers coming in. Great point there, Jody. Megan, let's flip over to you. So for CEP on the response side, what do you think?
So for CEP on the response side, I tailored to more local and county specific. We want to utilize the existing points of contact with community and other volunteer organizations to identify and address specific unmet needs. Sometimes those community groups, those local groups, will have information that we don't necessarily have yet. That the community has reached out to them and we haven't gotten that information yet. So we want to keep those lines of communication open again to find out what those specific unmet needs are. And then also by reaching out to local VOADs and COADs and lean forward by setting up calls to facilitate communication and gather information on what services other organizations are already providing, and filling in gaps where we can when possible. Also, make sure to include all organizations that play a part in the response. Sometimes some of those community organizations kind of get left out. Organizations like Animal Services that play such a crucial role in every single response. A lot of times, for some reason, we're all in the mass care human side of the world, but we're not thinking of many humans have animals that are going to need to be cared for as well. So looping in those community groups that deal with other facets of the community that we do need to be aware of and coordinate with. Back to you, Luke.
I love it. And we see, I mean, looking at it now, oh, we got stuff flowing in. I love this. So Norma, I love your piece in the focus on vulnerable communities, right? We know all disasters are local. We kind of know on the mass care side, we already know who's most vulnerable, right? Think about the senior centers, think about the centers for independent living, think about low income areas or gated neighborhoods or areas where people don't speak English as a first language, right? We can identify those places, we can have lists of them, and we can kind of ask, even in the readiness phase, but certainly in the response phase, has anybody checked in? Has anybody actually just gone in a vehicle and gone out there? Right, so we can check that with operations. Maybe that goes into our mission tracker, right? So hit the top 10 most vulnerable areas in the community. They report back in. Now we're sharing that with government and community partners. And now we've got, if I tap into, oh man, we're making music here, right? So if I tap into what Mary said is making contact with the faith-based organizations, now we're serving them on a platter exactly what they need. Here's a community, here are their needs. We can help facilitate that with the Red Cross. Now we've made music, right? We're helping people who need it, and we're doing it much more quickly, and we're not waiting for somebody to die, the bad news article, to get screamed at, to get chewed out on a call, right? We're being proactive, we're leaning in. Aaron, your point on making sure communication about the shelter location is out to all external partners. Let's make that a line item in our task list, right? Have we shared the shelter locations? And I would add one more thing. Do all of our external relations folks know where all of our shelter locations are and what all of our shelter changes are, right? If you're sitting in EOC and you hear from a government partner that the shelter's closing at 5 p.m. and you didn't know that, it's kind of embarrassing. I've been there, right? And so how can we on the external relations side ensure that we, by leaning forward and listening, thinking, and then communicating, learn from operations and logistics, right? What's changing, what the plans are. I saw something in here. Did Barb say it? Yeah, I think Barb, your point on the conduit, right? When there's a need that we don't meet, one of the things that we can do is, if we think about with government partners, if we're as a conduit in external relations, we're kind of the conduit between operations and those mass care decision makers in government, right? So we're the ones, an operations person may not be able to sit at that table. So by leaning in, we need to ensure that we have a really good grasp of operations so that there's no daylight between what our ops team wants to do with a shelter and what the government wants to do with the shelter, right? We can have disagreement, that's fine. But if we're all communicating about that effectively and we understand each other's postures, now we're in business. So let's see, I think we hit, are we on to recovery or are we on to government? Remind me, Sherry.
We're on to government
government and response. All right, so let's start, Megan, let's start with you on that one. And I love seeing the thumbs up of the different things. If there's something that resonates with you, give it a thumbs up, give it a heart. I love seeing this feedback. So Megan, let's start with you for government checklist items for response.
So creating a task force at the county level to facilitate communication with a regular meeting schedule. Daily if needed, twice a day if needed at the beginning, whatever you feel like the proper cadence for meetings is, do it. And it can change over time, right, as the response ebbs and flows. But having that regular check-in meeting to make sure everybody's on the same page. Also closely collaborating with all appropriate governmental agencies to identify and address unmet needs and gaps in service delivery. Assist government partners if possible in finding solutions if the unmet need is something we cannot fulfill, but we might have a community partner who might be able to. So facilitating that as well.
I love that. As you're going on that one, I saw, Diane, you made me chuckle on this one. And yes, I'm getting my my simulation ASAP. But as we think about IDC, as we think about health and mental health services, we get burned all the time. And it's not just, I don't care about us, it's our clients. Our clients get burned when people expect the Red Cross to do something that we're not equipped to do. And next thing you know, it takes 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 days to get the appropriate medical or mental health resources to support our clients. So just like we were talking about what the Red Cross does and doesn't do, maybe we need something that's a little bit more specific when it comes to IDC, individual disaster care, that we can share with our partners, government and community. Sherry, let's kick over to you. Government and response. What can we put on our checklist from your vantage point?
So it was a perfect segue, what we were just talking about, working with our government partners on specific unmet needs. I regularly lean on access and functional needs out of the Office of Emergency Services at the state of California. Something needs to happen, especially quickly, that might be out of the scope of the Red Cross, I loop them in. Even sometimes if it is within the scope of the Red Cross, I bring them in to help smooth things over at times, explain the process, have a second agency just there to back up our stance or explain how things might work. But more importantly, to let the client know, or clients, that there are many people out there who have their back and are supporting their need as quickly and effectively and efficiently as we can. It may not be immediately, but we're doing all that we can, and we're bringing in as many resources and people to facilitate that, filling that need as we can. So a lot of times bringing in those partners to reassure our clients and our other partners that it's happening. We're making this, we hear you, we know what the need is, and we're working together to make it happen.
Yeah, I like that. And I was one of the things I think that ties in. Ronnie had a really good point as you were talking, Sherry, on sort of identifying roles and responsibilities. And the piece I really liked from Ronnie here is providing insight into the political philosophy and structure. That is huge. And so one of the things, another tool that we're going to work on for our tool belt, we don't have it quite polished enough yet, but is sort of a who's who in the county, right? Who's who in the operational area. And that's something we actually want to have, we want to train all of us to, is who's the decision maker? Who's the secret heavy when it comes to, which way the city council is going to go? Or, is the sheriff really calling the shots here? Or is it, is it public works, or is it the city manager? Who's new to the county? Who's been there for a long time? Oftentimes we see people, share to your point, we see people who we think are the decision maker, or we see people who we think are calling the shots, but they may have been sent in by mutual aid. They don't know anything about the county, but they're the one who's supposed to be the mass care person for the county, and they've been there for a week, and their background is in public works. So there's a lot that we can learn there. And then let's see. Mary, I love the focus on feeding. I think that's so tactical for us. And Betsy, your point on what we've got in terms of external relations and trying to find those vulnerable communities ties into a lot of what Norma was saying. Megan, let's go to you for recovery and for community partners. What are some things we can add to the checklist?
So I just wanted to touch back on one point you made, that all response and recovery is local. So keeping that in mind while we're doing our work. So in recovery for community partnerships, reach out to all your community partners participating in recovery and ensure that our recovery team has all their current contact information. You'll notice a distinct theme here. You got to be able to communicate. If you can't communicate, you're not going to be able to get the job done. So current contact information and an up-to-date list of who the partners are that is readily available to whoever is stepping into that position. And then you want to, again, lean forward and make those introductions between our recovery team and the appropriate community partners, so that that first step's been taken, the team has been formed, and then work can get done much quicker than if people are trying to find people within the community but don't have that list in place already.
Yeah, Jody, your point on keeping, we've got a lot of leadership positions and a lot of people who are out and about, and this is true of, just think about even with outside of DCS, you could have a vice president, you could have a regional executive, you could have an elected official, right, who's was sent there because some Red Crossers, the elected official liaison said, hey, you should check this place out. Making sure that we understand who's out and about in the field, maybe what their agendas are and what their timeline and schedule are, making sure that they're empowered with accurate information. We don't want to send them to the wrong place. Norma, to your point on updating information, updating those district lines so that our partners understand, along with district lines, it could be a point of distribution, it could be a shelter, right? Understanding those changing fixed locations or fixed boundaries. Sherry, how about you? What are some thoughts?
For me, I would say probably really vital is identifying the partners that are out there in the community providing recovery assets, determining the target population for those assets, and then making sure that those partners are aware of other Red Cross sites where we're doing similar work, where we could piggyback and join forces, other government sites like FEMA DRCs, other community county resource centers, where it would be beneficial for them to be, and facilitating that, because so often on disasters, our community partners are doing their own thing, which sometimes works great for their parish or whatever their population they're serving might be. But a lot of times it could benefit the client if they could hit all these resources at one place. So making sure that those community partners know where those sites are so that they can join forces with us and our government partners.
I love it. Let's flip over. 5 minutes left here. I think we're right on track. Let's flip over. Megan, I'll go to you on the GovOps side with respect to recovery. What are some checklist items that we could add in?
So on the government ops side, obviously wanting to collaborate with our partners on setting up local assistance centers, so that we can bring our partners together in a single location so our clients can get the services they need. Collaborating with specific tribal or county groups to ensure that they have the information they need to assist their clients with recovery. And going back to communication again, keep those lines of communication open to facilitate a smoother recovery for all who have been affected and for all of the government partners who are working on recovery with us as well.
As you were going, Sue and Norma tag teamed off each other here, where Sue's talking about a document that we can share that shows where a client can visit to get services from different agencies, right? That can be an easy sort of chop template that we've got. And I think that also ties into Betsy's thinking and Norma on your part of just people who don't qualify for traditional recovery dollars. That's our focus. I mean, there's kind of the haves and the have-nots after disaster, right? There's the people who are going to be able to get back in the community, rebuild, they've got insurance, they haven't lost their job, they know how to navigate the recovery process. And then there's the have-nots, right? And those people may end up back in the community, but those are the people who are more likely to experience homelessness, fall victim to drug, alcohol abuse, crime, all of those different things, or people who are just going to be in improperly housed thing, right? You got 20 people under one roof, or people living in a house that's been, red tagged, things like we see that all the time. And so if we can lean forward, convene that group with our additional recovery partners, we may not be able to solve the problem or solve it entirely or solve it as quickly as we hope, but that ensures that we're doing everything we can to address some of those chronic, as we talk about acute to chronic with our disasters, to address some of those increasingly chronic problems that we're seeing after these larger and more recurrent disasters. Sherry, how about some thoughts from you?
So mine is going to be a little bit the opposite of what I previously spoke with our community partners. It's identifying all of those county and FEMA DRCs and resource centers, documenting their hours when they're open so that it can be shared throughout the community with our community partners, but also clients. Document it, like you say, put it in print if possible, if it's as regular of a schedule that qualifies for that type of print. But essentially just making sure that everyone is on the same page and knows where everyone is at, government partners and community partners alike, so they can collaborate and work together to offer the best services possible to clients who are out there who may have transportation challenges and may not be able to bounce all over town to different places. So coordinating those efforts.
I love it. We just got about 8 more things. William, I love your idea on sort of this muted version of the director's brief, but essentially something that's tailored that we can share with partners that's not just useful for the Red Cross, but is something that can be used across the whole spectrum by all of our partners. I think there's a lot of value in that. So I think by my count, we've got like 200 or 300 ideas in here, which are fantastic. What I will commit to you is over the course of this series, we are going to turn this into, and I'll show you just one of the first stabs that we took at this. So something that you can have online, offline, in an Excel, a Word document, printed out in your back pocket, something where we can actually check off and really track through a lot of our different things. Right now, we've got the title ER Checklist for Success. But there's no reason we can't have this. We are going to do this in the Pacific Division, and we're gonna hold ourselves accountable with it. And I think this is something we've been hearing the need for it, and I really, really, really appreciate all of the great conversation and dialogue in our chat today. And I think this is going to be a game changer for us for this season and for many, many more to come. But let me, in the last minute, we've got Sherry and Megan. Any last things for closing? Thank you both for being put on the spot at least 6 times by my count as we went through today.
I just want to take the opportunity to thank everyone for attending. We've had an incredible response. Our deliverables to you each week are, we're going to send out another form that's going to include some knowledge check items, give you some practice at applying what we covered today. It gives you an opportunity to give us feedback so we can do better, so we can make this series as most useful as possible to you, and also an opportunity for you to reach out for guidance, whether it be in your development, through your external relations journey, through classes, instruction that you need, classes you're having trouble getting, or just advice on how to move forward and how to progress through your journey. And then finally, we're going to add to this scenario that we had listed in the form last week. Please go back and look at it if you didn't have an opportunity for week 1, so that week 2 will make sense. But we're going to add on to that disaster scenario each week and ask you for some feedback on it. So with that, thank you again for attending, and I'll see you next week.
And it's 2 o'clock, and Sherry said it all perfectly. So reach out if you have any questions. Our doors are always open. And thank you all for attending. This is an amazing group. Really, really wonderful.
Thanks for the engagement today, everybody. Have a great afternoon.
Bye.